All right. The first time I got demotivated attending a motivational speech was almost a quarter of a century back. I was in a job and I was listening to a motivational speech, and the motivator had taken us back to the year 1893. And in 1893, the scene that he creates, the motivational speaker creates a scene, and he says the year is 1893 and Mahatma Gandhi is traveling by first class in a train in South Africa. At Maritzburg station, he gets thrown off the first class from the train and is there on the platform in the year 1893. Mahatma Gandhi has got a couple of choices to make. He can pick up his bags, move on to the second class coach, travel on with his journey, or he can pick up his bags, go back home to Kasturbai. That's his wife, ask for a hot water bottle, or a cold pack, or a pain relief balm, because he's been thrown off the train. But he decides to not do either one of these. This is what the speaker is telling us, and I'm listening. Mahatma Gandhi decides to stay at the station the whole night, sit, suffer, shiver, look into his pain in the eyes, try to figure out why is he suffering. And the reflection and the pain throughout the night makes him realize that the real reason why he is suffering is because of discrimination. Discrimination because of the color of his skin. And he feels this inequity and this inequality is not okay. He feels he has to put up a fight against it. So he decides to raise a voice and gather voice against inequity and inequality. He feels white must equal brown. Gora equal bhura. That's the purpose of his life. He must do that for a long time, and that then gives him a platform to spiritually uplift himself also. A purpose makes you spiritually uplift yourself. So this was the motivational speaker speaking, and there it was me listening to it with rapt attention, and I was mighty impressed. I said, wow, that's a life worth living. My resolve at the end of that motivational speech was that I too want to be a little bit like Mahatma Gandhi. That's the purpose of a motivational speech. The two values that appealed to me the most were truth and courage. And I decided to use truth and courage to go and give some feedback to my boss in the company that I was working in. Use truth and courage to go and tell him what are some of the better ways of running this company. So I went ahead with these two values of truth and courage, with full enthusiasm and energy of Mahatma Gandhi, because there was a little bit of Mahatma Gandhi inside me now. I was motivated. I was inspired. After all, I had attended a motivational speech. So I went ahead, all smiling, wanting to give him some honest feedback. My boss never said that he disliked my feedback, but his body language said it. After I gave him feedback, he withdrew the warm eye contact from me. His handshakes with me were like a dead fish. He started ignoring me and started making my life really, really miserable. And what had happened in my life, a motivational speech had really backfired on me. Who did I blame? Obviously myself. For the industry of motivational speakers is such, which teaches you to point fingers towards yourself. For how can I blame words like truth and courage? It would be extremely disrespectful to disrespect respectful words. I mean, I grew up with maxims like, ere you remark another sin, bid thy conscience look within. So what do? He makes my life miserable. I sit and suffer. And well-wishers around me who do not want to see me suffering like this, what do? They start giving me more clichéd wisdom. And it starts to rain clichéd wisdom. And the clichéd wisdom goes like this: have a purpose, have a passion, have patience, perseverance, man, discipline, excellence, goals, no written goals, confidence, achievement, restraint, balance, detachment, faith, growth, commitment, collaborate, determination, never quit. Stress spoils health, health is wealth, excess of everything is bad, and everything is sorry, no point in worrying that. And did it work? It did not. For it is extremely difficult to become things. It's easier to do things. I was not only a failure in giving true, honest feedback, which I had given decently. I was not rude. I was not crude. I had followed all the principles of constructive feedback, but it had still backfired. And while I was sitting and suffering, another person now sees my suffering, and the person comes and says, man, try gratitude. Gratitude for the fact that at least you have a job. So what if your boss is making your life a nightmare? At least you have a job in the pink of your health, in the pink of your career, when the Indian economy is booming in the late 90s, thanks to late Prime Minister Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao. But the worst piece of clichéd wisdom advice that I got, which really didn't work, was this one. Someone actually came and said, have compassion for your boss. The person who's made my life miserable, a clichéd wisdom comes and says, have compassion for me, and if you meditate enough, and if you breathe alternatively enough, then you will realize that his atoms and your atoms and his energy and your aura. Did it work? No, it did not work. For a basic principle of education was not being followed. And what is the basic principle of education? The basic principle of education, ma'am, I say it with all humility, is that knowledge flows from known to unknown. I do not understand words like unconditional love and unconditional compassion and the balance of Gautam Buddha. I don't understand it. I'm just a normal, regular, restless bundle of energy. What is it that I needed at that point in time? When my boss was making my life miserable, what is it that I needed? I needed the skills of having a courageous conversation. I needed skills of networking. I needed to do personal branding. I needed to learn brand me. I needed to be a bit more assertive. I needed to manage upwards, but I didn't get any of these skills and competencies. Instead, I got motherhood statements, clichéd wisdom, quantum physics. Did it work for me? Not at all. So what's the moral of the story? Are all motivational speeches full of clichéd wisdom? Will they work? Will age-old wisdom work? Well, it will work. For highly mature individuals, for highly evolved souls, for highly sattvic individuals who've transcended pairs of opposites. But for averages like me, motivational wisdom will work if and only if we follow 4 specific aspects. So if you get enough dosage of motivational wisdom in conversations back at home, in the office, from the speakers, here, listen on. The 2 things that we are supposed to do when we are attending motivational speeches to get the most out of motivational speeches are: 1, we must try to find the context and our reality and our nature at that point in time. Let me take you to my crooked boss, the Shakuni boss, Shakuni being the character from the epic Mahabharata. He was a bit of a sharp shark. He was the kind of a guy who says that you're either my friend or my enemy. No non-aligned movement. What will work? What will work? What will work is if Yadhav Mehra, who is listening to that motivational lecture, Yadhav Mehra needs to make a 2x2 matrix of the types of bosses that exist. Well, broadly, there are 4 types of bosses. Who are bosses? Bosses are people with legitimacy power. They have the chair. There could be 4 types of bosses, and if we were to put them in a 2x2 matrix, on the horizontal axis you put their character, and on the vertical axis you put their intelligence. On the horizontal axis you put whether they are well-intentioned or ill-intentioned, whether they are team-oriented or not so team-oriented, and on the vertical axis, if you could actually put whether they are intelligent or not so intelligent. The best type of bosses are bosses who are in the top right quadrant in this particular slide. Looks like I'll make it work. Okay, thank you very much. So, which is the best kind of a boss? The best kind of a boss is obviously a person who's well-intentioned and intelligent. And who's the most dangerous boss in your life? That's the Shakuni up there in the top left quadrant. Will feedback work with all the bosses? No. Will truth and courage work with all the bosses? No. You know that. A lot of seasoned people are sitting in the front row here, and some faculty is sitting there. Where will truthful, honest feedback work? Mahatma Gandhi's truth and courage will work here. I wish all of you bosses up there. But there are 7% of them. 93% of them are shades of grey, no pun intended. What will work in the top left quadrant? The top left quadrant will not be able to receive honest feedback. They need tact. So you've got to have the fine craft of stating what you want to say, striking the fine balance between courage and consideration. Otherwise, you'll really put your foot in the mouth. The second lesson that I want you to keep in mind, the aspect that you have to keep in mind when you are listening to motivational speeches, and please remember this, is that when you are not able to implement self-help speeches, when you are not able to implement self-help speeches in your daily life, for heaven's sake, do not blame yourselves endlessly. It will not be good for your self-esteem. Stop telling yourselves, I have less willpower because I do not have the grit of Mahatma Gandhi. It is going to create fear of abandonment. It is going to create self-doubt. It is going to create loss of self-esteem. Stop blaming yourselves unnecessarily because motherhood statements are not easy to implement. The way to implement motherhood statements is by small actions, sub-behaviors, competencies that will help you move there. So the first part that I want you to keep in mind is keep the x-axis, y-axis with you. Have the 4 quadrants. You've got the Krishna boss. You've got the Shakuni boss. Choose your strategy accordingly. The second part is that if motivational speeches do not work for you, if motivational conversations do not work for you, do not excessively blame yourselves, for you will create fear of abandonment, self-doubt, and loss of self-esteem. Now, there are 2 lessons that there should be there for motivational speakers as well. These 2 were that if you were listeners, motivational speakers must keep the context of everyone in the room in mind when they are dishing out clichéd wisdom. For example, if a motivational speaker comes here and talks to you about never quit, man, go. Never quit. There are posters on it. Okay? There are poetry on it. Now, this is clichéd wisdom. Never quit. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends on where you are on the inverted U stress curve, which is a function of stress and performance. What this curve, inverted U curve says is that as stress goes up, performance goes up. As stress goes up, performance goes up, till a particular point in time that as stress goes up, performance goes down. Now, when you are in a particular part of the curve, take a look at this. If you are here in the curve in your life, never quit. This fellow is right. If you are in this part of your life, then stay the course. Never quit. But if you are here and you are a self-improvement junkie, pal, take it easy. Quit. Take it easy. Otherwise, you go to the shrink. And if you are here, then quit for a while. Motivational speakers have to make things contextual for a wide audience that is there. There could be people here in this room who are suffering from anxiety, and the more you tell them, never quit, the more anxious they will become. So for heaven's sake, quit some things. Motivational wisdom has found its way into day-to-day conversations as well. It's not just the motivational speakers who are talking. They found their way into daily conversations. Conversations which have become, do this, become this, don't be this. Now, these are very clichéd Gyan conversations. A typical conversation like that goes like this. I have a problem. What's your problem? I'm lonely. And why are you lonely? I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I'm socially awkward. And there comes the first mantra. Come on, go make friends. Meet new people. And the poor fellow who has a problem says, I tried. I can't get a conversation going. There is a fear of getting ridiculed. And that comes the second mantra. Become this. Become confident. And the person now says, I can't do that. I can't shed anxiety. I get nervous with new people. I can't have ice-breaking conversations. And comes the third mantra, which is, don't be negative. We have to use motivational wisdom, cliched wisdom, motherhood statements, age-old wisdom very carefully, very sparingly. And if people around you are using them a lot, then find your context. Accept what is relevant for you. Do not accept what is not relevant for you. For heaven's sake, do not criticize yourselves and do not suffer from the disease of perfectionism. I think it's about time that motivational speakers like me, we begin to understand the context of the audience, work very hard, and perhaps, we need to move on from becoming motivational speakers to perspirational speakers. Thank you very much.